In the year 2379, Earth had become a mere footnote in the grand annals of the Galactic Federation, a sprawling empire of advanced civilizations that spanned light years and ruled the cosmos with an iron grip. To them, humanity was a primitive species, useful only for menial labor and the extraction of Earth's dwindling natural resources. For most humans, life had become a monotonous cycle of work, eat, and sleep, under the watchful eyes of their alien overseers. The skies were no longer blue but a dull, sickly gray, a reflection of the hopelessness that had settled over the planet. The once bustling cities were now overrun with Federation machinery, and humans moved through the streets like ants in a colony, their spirits crushed by years of subjugation. Amidst this bleak reality, we meet Jack Marlowe, a 30-something technician with a knack for sarcasm and a healthy disdain for authority. Jack had always been the kind of guy who could fix anything, from broken drones to his friends' bad decisions. But fixing Earth? That was a whole other story. One day, while Jack was repairing a malfunctioning energy conduit deep within one of the Federation's towering control centers, he stumbled upon something that would change the course of human history. A tiny, flickering piece of ancient technology, buried beneath layers of alien circuitry, caught his eye. It wasn't Federation tech, it was something older, something human. Curious as ever, Jack pried the device free and pocketed it, figuring he'd examine it later when the alien overseers weren't breathing down his neck. That night, back in his tiny, cluttered apartment, Jack powered up the device. A soft hum filled the room, and suddenly, a holographic interface flickered to life. "Welcome, user," the device chimed in a warm, almost nostalgic voice. "Activating latent genetic sequence." What?" Jack muttered, staring at the hologram like it had just insulted his mother. But before he could react, a strange sensation washed over him, like 1,000 tiny pins and needles dancing under his skin. The next thing he knew, his mind was flooded with images, memories, and knowledge that wasn't his own. When the sensation finally subsided, Jack found himself standing in the middle of his living room, wide-eyed and breathless. He could feel something different, something new coursing through his veins. It was like waking up after a long sleep, only to realize you've had superpowers the whole time. He clenched his fists, feeling an unfamiliar energy pulse through his hands. With a flick of his wrist, he accidentally sent a lamp flying across the room. It shattered against the wall, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was racing. "No way," he whispered to himself. No freaking way. The device had unlocked something within him, an ancient, forgotten power that had been lying dormant in the human genome for millennia. Jack had just awakened to a new reality, one where humans might not be as helpless as the Federation believed. The next day, Jack met up with his closest friends, Ava, a sharp-tongued engineer with a love for explosives, and Theo, a quiet, brooding hacker who could break into any system with his eyes closed. Over a couple of mugs of terrible, synthetic coffee in their usual dive bar, Jack spilled the beans. "So, you're telling me you've got superpowers now?" Ava asked, her eyes narrowing in skepticism. "Yeah, pretty much," Jack replied, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "I'm still figuring out the details, but I'm telling you, this is big. Like, we can finally stick it to the Federation big." Theo leaned back in his chair, a rare smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "If what you're saying is true, then we've got a serious game changer on our hands. But we can't just go around throwing lamps at walls, Jack. We need to figure out how to use this, and fast." Ava grinned, the kind of grin that usually preceded something exploding. "Well, I've always wanted to blow up something bigger than a drone. Count me in." And just like that, the spark of rebellion was lit. Jack, Ava, and Theo began to dig deeper into the device's secrets, uncovering a treasure trove of hidden knowledge and abilities that had been locked away in human DNA. They weren't just gaining powers, they were rediscovering what it meant to be human. As they trained and honed their newfound skills, they started to recruit others, carefully spreading the word among trusted friends and allies. What began as a small group of misfits soon grew into a full-blown resistance movement. The Federation had no idea what was coming. But Jack knew one thing for sure: they were about to show the galaxy that humanity was far from being just another cog in the Federation's machine. The rebellion grows. Word of Jack's discovery spread faster than the Federation could monitor. It wasn't long before the small group of misfits became a full-fledged underground movement. People who had long accepted their fate as laborers and pawns in the Federation's game were now whispering about something new: hope. The more people Jack and his crew brought into the fold, the more they realized just how powerful this ancient genetic gift was. Each person they awakened had their own unique abilities. Ava's knack for explosives turned into something far more potent. She could manipulate energy fields, creating force fields or turning any object into a makeshift bomb with just a touch. Theo, already a master hacker, found that he could interface directly with machines, controlling them with his mind as easily as he could type on a keyboard. The rebels began to strike back. At first, it was small, sabotaging Federation machinery, disrupting supply lines, and freeing captured humans from labor camps. But as their numbers grew and their power strengthened, so did their ambition. They started planning something bigger, something that would send a message the Federation couldn't ignore. Operation Phoenix, Jack called it. The plan was to hit one of the Federation's primary control centers on Earth, a sprawling facility that managed everything from resource extraction to planetary defenses. If they could take it down, it would cripple the Federation's grip on the planet and give humanity the upper hand for the first time in centuries. One night, as they gathered in their hidden base, a repurposed underground bunker from the old wars, Jack stood in front of his team, a holographic map of the control center floating in the air between them. "This is it," Jack said, pointing to a heavily fortified section of the map. "The nerve center. We take this out, and the Federation loses control over Earth's systems. They'll be scrambling to recover, and that's when we make our move." Ava leaned in, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "And by take this out, I assume you mean we blow it sky high?" "Pretty much," Jack replied with a grin. "But it's not just about the explosion. We need to get in, plant the charges, and get out without them knowing what hit them. Theo, that's where you come in." Theo nodded, already analyzing the facility's defenses in his mind. "I can disable their security systems long enough for us to get in and out. But we'll need to move fast. Once they realize what's happening, they'll lock everything down." The plan was dangerous, borderline suicidal, but it was their best shot. And for the first time, the odds were in their favor. The night of the operation, the rebels moved under the cover of darkness. Jack led the charge, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. They reached the perimeter of the control center, and Theo got to work, his fingers flying over his portable console as he hacked into the facility's systems. "We're in," Theo whispered, his voice calm despite the tension. "You've got 10 minutes before they realize what's happening." Jack and Ava slipped through the security gates, moving like shadows as they navigated the maze of corridors leading to the nerve center. Ava carried a backpack full of explosives, her fingers tingling with anticipation. As they reached the heart of the facility, Jack glanced at Ava. "You ready?" Ava grinned. "Always." With practiced precision, she planted the charges around the central power core. The hum of energy filled the air, the power of the Federation's control over Earth condensed into one vulnerable point. "Charges set," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's get out of here." They retraced their steps, every second ticking away like a countdown to their own destruction. But as they neared the exit, the alarms blared. "They've found us," Theo's voice crackled over their comms. "You've got 2 minutes, tops. I'm shutting down the security doors to slow them down, but you need to move." Jack and Ava broke into a sprint, the walls flashing red with emergency lights. They could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and the clattering of weapons as Federation soldiers closed in on them. "Almost there," Jack panted, pushing himself harder. "Just a little further." They burst through the final door, the cold night air hitting them like a wave. Theo was already waiting by their escape vehicle, his eyes wide with urgency. "Get in!" he shouted. They dove into the vehicle, and Theo gunned the engine, the tires screeching as they tore away from the facility. Jack glanced back, just in time to see the building erupt in a massive explosion, flames lighting up the night sky. Ava let out a whoop of triumph, and even Theo cracked a rare smile. But Jack's mind was already on the next step. They had dealt the Federation a serious blow, but this was only the beginning. The real fight was still ahead. As they drove back to their base, Jack felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. For the first time, humanity was fighting back, and they were winning. The tide turns. In the days following Operation Phoenix, the rebellion's success sent shockwaves throughout the Galactic Federation. The destruction of the control center was a blow they hadn't anticipated, and the ripple effect was immediate. Across the planet, Federation operations began to falter, their grip on Earth weakening as they struggled to regain control. For the first time in centuries, humans were starting to believe they had a fighting chance. The underground movement grew rapidly. People who had once resigned themselves to a life of servitude now found themselves rallying behind the rebels. Word of Jack and his team's exploits spread like wildfire, and soon, they were joined by others, engineers, scientists, soldiers, each bringing their own skills and strengths to the cause. In the heart of their hidden base, Jack, Ava, Theo, and the other leaders of the rebellion gathered to plan their next move. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency and excitement, but also a sobering awareness of the stakes. Jack stood at the center of the room, looking around at the faces of those who had put their trust in him. There were more of them now, and with that came a greater responsibility. He felt the weight of it on his shoulders, but he also knew they were closer than ever to achieving something extraordinary. "All right," Jack began, his voice steady and firm. "We've shown the Federation that we're not just going to lie down and take it. But this is only the beginning. They're going to hit back, and when they do, we need to be ready." Ava leaned against the table, her arms crossed, but her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let them come. We've got more than a few tricks up our sleeves now." Theo nodded in agreement, his fingers already typing away on his tablet. "We've intercepted some of their communications. They're planning a counterattack, but they're not sure where we're operating from. If we play our cards right, we can use that to our advantage." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The rebels had become a formidable force, but they knew they couldn't afford to be complacent. Jack looked at the map projected on the wall, which showed the locations of remaining Federation strongholds across the planet. "We need to keep them on the defensive. Hit them where it hurts, and keep them guessing. But we also need to protect what we've built here. If they find this base..." "They won't," Theo cut in, his voice cool and confident. "I've been working on some new tech that will make it nearly impossible for them to track us. Think of it as a digital cloaking device. As long as we don't do anything too reckless, we should be safe." Ava smirked. "Reckless? Us? Never." Jack couldn't help but grin. Despite the danger, there was something exhilarating about what they were doing. They were taking on a galactic empire with nothing but their wits, their courage, and the powers they were just beginning to understand. Over the next few weeks, the rebels launched a series of coordinated attacks against the Federation. They struck supply depots, sabotaged communications, and liberated labor camps, all while avoiding direct confrontation with the Federation's main forces. Each victory fueled their momentum, and more people joined their ranks. But the Federation wasn't sitting idle. They knew they were losing control, and they were becoming increasingly desperate. Soon, they deployed a new weapon, one that threatened to tip the scales back in their favor. It was called the Obliterator, a massive, mobile fortress armed with enough firepower to level entire cities. The Federation had kept it hidden for just such an occasion, and now they were sending it straight for the heart of the rebellion. When the news reached the rebel base, a hush fell over the command room. The Obliterator wasn't just a threat, it was a game ender. If it reached them, it would be all over. Jack stared at the holographic image of the fortress, his mind racing. They had to stop it, but how? The Obliterator was nearly impenetrable, and even with all their powers, a frontal assault would be suicide. Ava broke the silence. "So, we blow it up. I mean, that's what we do, right?" Theo shook his head. "It's not that simple. The Obliterator's defenses are state-of-the-art. We'd need to get inside, disable the shields, and plant charges in just the right spots. And even then, we'd be cutting it close." Jack rubbed his chin, deep in thought. There had to be a way, some weakness they could exploit. And then it hit him. "What if we don't have to destroy it?" Jack said slowly, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "What if we take control of it?" The room went silent as everyone turned to look at him. "You're talking about hijacking the Obliterator?" Theo asked, incredulous. "Exactly," Jack replied, his voice gaining confidence. "If we can get inside and override its systems, We could turn it against the Federation. Use their own weapon against them. Ava grinned, clearly liking the idea. Now that's my kind of plan. Theo hesitated, his analytical mind already working through the logistics. It's risky. We'd need to hack into its control systems, and there's no telling what kind of security measures they have in place. That's where you come in, Jack said, giving Theo a reassuring nod. You're the best there is, and I trust you. We'll give you all the support you need. Theo sighed, but a determined look settled on his face. All right. Let's do it. The plan was audacious, maybe even crazy, but it was their best shot. The rebellion's fate, and perhaps the fate of all humanity, hung in the balance. As the team prepared for what could be their final mission, Jack felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were about to take the biggest gamble of their lives, but if they pulled it off, the Federation would never see it coming. The obliterator was on its way, and the clock was ticking. But for the first time, Jack felt like they were ready. They had the power, the plan, and the determination to make history. And so, with their resolve steeled and their course set, the rebels set out to do the impossible, hijack the Federation's ultimate weapon and turn the tide of the war once and for all. Operation Hijack. The night before the mission, the rebel base was alive with a buzz of quiet determination. Everyone knew the stakes, there was no room for error. Jack, Ava, Theo, and the rest of their team gathered for one final briefing, each of them trying to mask their nerves with a veneer of calm. The plan was as simple as it was dangerous. The obliterator, with all its massive firepower, was on a direct course toward the base. The rebels couldn't confront it head-on, so they had to infiltrate it from within. Theo would hack into its systems, disable the defenses, and then, if everything went right, they'd turn the behemoth against the Federation itself. But there was no backup plan. If they failed, the obliterator would flatten their base, and the rebellion along with it. Jack stood in front of his team, his expression serious but calm. We've faced tough odds before, but nothing like this. I know what we're asking seems impossible. But I also know this, each of you has a strength that got us this far. We've been underestimated before, and we've always proved them wrong. Let's do it again. Ava punched Jack lightly on the shoulder. You've always been better at pep talks than I am. But let me just say this, I'm not ready to go down without a fight. We've got the tools, the talent, and a whole lot of guts. So let's make sure the Federation remembers who they're dealing with. Theo, as usual, kept his words brief. We've got one shot at this. Stick to the plan, and we can make it out. But don't hesitate. We don't get second chances. With the pep talk over, they all took a moment to ready themselves. Jack caught Ava's eye as she double-checked her gear. You sure you're ready for this? Ava grinned, a spark of mischief in her eyes. I was born ready, Marlowe. Besides, someone's got to keep you out of trouble. Jack laughed, a short, nervous sound. But it felt good to laugh, even if just for a moment. Let's do this, then. As the obliterator neared their location, the team moved out under the cover of darkness. The plan was to intercept the fortress as it made its final approach. Using cloaking technology Theo had modified, they approached undetected, slipping through the defenses like shadows in the night. Up close, the obliterator was even more intimidating, a hulking monstrosity of metal and firepower, with towering walls and massive turrets that could decimate anything in their path. But they couldn't think about that. Focus was everything. They reached an access hatch on the underside of the fortress, a weak point Theo had identified in the blueprints. It was their way in. Theo hacked the controls with practiced ease, and the hatch slid open with a hiss. One by one, the team climbed inside, their nerves electrified with anticipation. Inside, the obliterator was a maze of corridors, control rooms, and heavily guarded armories. The team moved quickly but carefully, avoiding patrols and surveillance systems as they made their way to the control center. Theo led the way, his mind already working through the complex layers of security he would need to bypass. As they reached the central control room, they found it heavily guarded by a squad of Federation soldiers. There was no way around it, they'd have to fight their way through. Looks like we're doing this the hard way, Ava muttered, pulling out her weapons. Just like old times. Jack nodded, signaling the team to get into position. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. They hit the guards with everything they had. Ava's energy manipulation skills turned their weapons into deadly tools of destruction, while Theo used his ability to control the fortress's systems to disable enemy defenses. Jack fought with a combination of brute strength and quick reflexes, his newly awakened powers giving him the edge he needed. The battle was fierce but short. The guards, caught off guard by the rebels' abilities, fell quickly. As the last guard hit the floor, Theo moved to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he worked to hack into the Obliterator's mainframe. "Give me a minute," Theo said, his voice tense as he focused on the task at hand. Ava kept a watchful eye on the door, ready for any reinforcements that might arrive. "Take your time, Theo, but not too much time." Seconds felt like hours as Theo worked. Jack could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on them. This was it, the moment that would determine whether they lived or died. Finally, Theo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'm in. Shields are down, and I've overridden the command protocols. The Obliterator is ours." Ava let out a whoop of triumph, and even Jack allowed himself a relieved grin. But the victory was short-lived. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor, more soldiers, and they weren't far away. "We need to move," Jack said, urgency creeping into his voice. "Theo, can you control this thing remotely?" "Already on it," Theo replied, tapping into his portable console. "I'll take care of navigation, but we've got to get out of here before they realize what's happened." The team retraced their steps, moving quickly but carefully as they made their way back to the access hatch. As they reached the hatch, the fortress shook violently, a sign that the Federation had realized what was happening. "They're firing on us," Theo said, his eyes glued to his console. "They're trying to take us down before we can get away." Ava looked at Jack, her expression serious. "We need to do something, Jack. If we don't disable their weapons, we won't make it out of here." Jack thought fast. "Okay, Ava, you and I will head to the weapons bay. Theo, you keep navigating us out of here. Once we're clear, we'll regroup." Without wasting another second, Jack and Ava sprinted toward the weapons bay. The corridors were shaking with the force of the Federation's assault, but they pushed through, driven by sheer determination. When they reached the weapons bay, they found it manned by a crew of Federation soldiers. "Here we go again," Ava said with a grim smile. The fight was brutal. The soldiers were well trained, but Jack and Ava fought with the desperation of people who had everything to lose. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the chamber as they took down the soldiers one by one. When the last one fell, Ava moved quickly, planting charges on the weapon systems. "Let's hope this does the trick," she muttered, setting the timer. They sprinted back to the access hatch, the charges detonating just as they reached the hatch. The explosion rocked the fortress, sending a shockwave through the entire structure. "We're clear." Theo's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm taking us out of here." Jack and Ava barely made it back to the hatch before Theo sealed it behind them. The fortress was shaking violently as it began its retreat, but Theo's quick thinking had saved them. They escaped just in time, the Obliterator now under their control. As they flew away from the battlefield, Jack allowed himself a rare moment of relief. They had done it. The Obliterator was theirs, and with it, they had the power to change the course of the war. But as they regrouped and prepared for the next phase, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Federation wasn't going to take this lying down. The real battle was still ahead, and they would need every ounce of strength and courage to see it through. But for now, they had won a major victory. And for the first time, Jack allowed himself to believe that they might actually have a chance. The final push. With the Obliterator now under their control, the rebellion had gained a massive advantage. The news spread quickly, and across Earth, humans began to rise up, emboldened by the rebels' success. The Federation, once so confident in its dominance, was now scrambling to contain the growing insurrection. Inside their newly acquired fortress, Jack, Ava, Theo, and the rest of the rebel leadership convened to plan their next move. The control room of the Obliterator, once a symbol of Federation oppression, now hummed with the energy of a new purpose. Jack stood at the command console, his eyes scanning the holographic display of Earth and the surrounding space. "We've done the impossible, but we can't let up now. The Federation is going to throw everything they've got at us, and we need to be ready. Ava, who was leaning against the console with her usual air of confidence, nodded in agreement. We've got the firepower, but we need to hit them where it hurts. Take out their command structure, and the rest will crumble. Theo, still working his magic on the fortress's systems, added, I've been digging through their communications. They've got a high-ranking commander en route to Earth, a guy named Admiral Voss. He's been sent to put an end to this rebellion, and from what I can tell, he's not the kind of guy who plays nice. Jack frowned. Admiral Voss. If we take him out, it could throw the entire Federation command into disarray. But it won't be easy. He'll be heavily guarded, and he's not going to make it easy for us to get close. Ava smirked. Good. I like a challenge. Theo pulled up a detailed schematic of Voss's flagship, a massive warship known as the Retribution. We're going to need a plan, something that gets us close enough to Voss without getting blown out of the sky. Jack studied the schematic, his mind working through the possibilities. We'll need to create a diversion. Something big enough to draw their attention away from us while we slip in. Ava, think you can rig something up? Ava's grin widened. Consider it done. I've got just the thing in mind. As the team worked out the details, a plan began to take shape. They would use the Obliterator to stage a frontal assault on the Federation's remaining forces, drawing their fire and attention. Meanwhile, a smaller strike team, led by Jack, would slip through the chaos and board the Retribution, where they would confront Admiral Voss directly. It was a high-risk plan, but it was the only way to take out the Federation's leadership and bring the war to a swift end. The day of the assault arrived, and the atmosphere on the Obliterator was tense but charged with anticipation. The rebels knew they were on the brink of something monumental, but they also understood the cost of failure. Jack, Ava, Theo, and the rest of the strike team prepared to launch their mission. As they suited up, there was an unspoken understanding between them: whatever happened, they were in this together, to the end. Theo finished his final checks and looked up at Jack. Everything's ready. We'll launch as soon as the diversion starts. Jack nodded, adjusting his gear. Everyone knows their role. Stick to the plan, and we can do this. Ava, ever the optimist, gave Jack a playful nudge. Just another day at the office, right? Jack chuckled, though there was an edge to his smile. Something like that. With everything in place, the strike team boarded their shuttle and prepared to launch. As the shuttle lifted off, Jack watched the vast expanse of space unfold before them. The Obliterator loomed large in the background, its weapon systems primed and ready for the assault. This is it, Jack said quietly to himself. Let's make it count. The Obliterator surged forward, its massive guns firing volleys of energy at the Federation fleet. The enemy ships responded in kind, their weapons lighting up the void as the battle began. The two forces clashed with a ferocity that shook the very fabric of space, each side fighting with everything they had. Amid the chaos, the strike team's shuttle slipped through the battlefield, using the debris and explosions as cover. Theo expertly navigated them through the crossfire, his hands steady on the controls as he brought them closer to the Retribution. There, Theo said, pointing to a weak spot in the warship's defenses. We breached there, and we'll be inside before they even know we're coming. Ava armed her weapons, ready for whatever awaited them. Let's give them a proper greeting. The shuttle locked onto the Retribution's hull, and the team prepared to board. Jack led the charge, blasting through the hatch and into the heart of the enemy ship. The corridors were narrow and filled with Federation soldiers, but the strike team moved with precision and speed, cutting through the resistance with ruthless efficiency. As they pushed deeper into the ship, Jack could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. This was it, the final push. Everything they'd fought for led to this moment. They reached the command deck, where Admiral Voss awaited them. He was a towering figure, clad in sleek armor, his eyes cold and calculating. The air was thick with tension as the two sides faced off. So, the rebels finally show themselves, Voss said, his voice dripping with disdain. I must admit, I expected more from the so-called saviors of humanity. Jack stepped forward, his gaze locked on Voss. We're not here to talk, Voss. This ends now. Voss sneered, drawing his weapon. Indeed it does. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Voss was a skilled fighter, but Jack and his team fought with the desperation of those who knew they had nothing left to lose. Blades clashed, energy bolts flew, and the command deck became a maelstrom of chaos. Ava, with her energy manipulation, was the first to gain an advantage. She created a force field that disoriented Voss, giving Jack the opening he needed. With a swift, decisive move, Jack brought Voss to his knees, disarming him and holding him at gunpoint. "It's over," Jack said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Voss looked up at him, his expression a mix of fury and resignation. "You think this will change anything? The Federation will never stop. There will always be another Voss, another war. You can't win." Jack stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "Maybe. But we're not going to stop fighting. Not now, not ever." Without another word, Jack delivered the final blow, ending Voss's reign of terror. The room fell silent, the weight of the victory settling over the team. Theo moved to the control console, quickly overriding the ship's systems. "The retribution is ours. We've got full control." Ava let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "We did it. We actually did it." Jack looked around at his team, the people who had fought beside him through every challenge, every battle. They had done the impossible. The Federation's grip on Earth was broken, and humanity had finally taken its first steps toward freedom. But Jack knew this wasn't the end. The fight would continue, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. There were other planets, other species under the Federation's control, and they would need help. As the strike team regrouped and began the journey back to the Obliterator, Jack felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The rebellion had won a crucial victory, but the war for freedom was far from over. And Jack Marlowe was ready for whatever came next. The Federation has suffered a crushing defeat, but Jack and his team know the battle for freedom is just beginning. A new rebel joins the fight. As the strike team returned to the Obliterator, the atmosphere was electric with their recent victory. They had taken out one of the Federation's top commanders, secured a powerful warship, and struck a major blow against their oppressors. But the galaxy was vast, and they knew this was only the beginning. Back on board the Obliterator, Jack, Ava, and Theo were greeted with cheers from the other rebels. There was a sense of celebration in the air, but also a quiet understanding that the war was far from over. As they debriefed and began planning their next moves, Ava suggested they take a quick detour on their way back to base. "There's a Federation outpost nearby," she explained, pulling up a map. "It's small, nothing compared to what we just took on, but they've been using it as a holding facility for prisoners. I think it's time we paid them a visit." Jack agreed. They had the element of surprise on their side, and freeing more people from the Federation's grasp was always a priority. They quickly assembled a small team and set out for the outpost. It was a quick operation. Ava's explosives took care of the security systems, and Theo disabled the remaining defenses. The rebels swept through the facility, freeing the prisoners and gathering any useful intel. As they moved through the final section of the outpost, Jack noticed something odd. Amidst the rubble and debris, a faint sound caught his attention, a low, whimpering noise. He followed the sound to a small, dark corner of the facility, where he found a cage. Inside, huddled in the back, was a small, scrappy-looking dog. The dog was clearly frightened, but as soon as it saw Jack, it perked up, its tail wagging slightly despite its fear. "Hey there, buddy," Jack said softly, kneeling down to get a better look. The dog's eyes were wide, but there was a glimmer of hope in them, as if it knew Jack was a friend. Ava appeared beside him, peering into the cage. "What do we have here? A new recruit?" Jack smiled, reaching out to unlatch the cage. "Looks like it. You think we have room for one more rebel?" The dog cautiously stepped out of the cage, its body tense but clearly grateful to be free. Jack gently reached out a hand, and after a moment of hesitation, the dog sniffed it before giving it a tentative lick. "Good boy," Jack said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You're with us now." The dog, who was soon dubbed Rex by the team, quickly became a part of the crew. Despite his rough appearance, a mix of various breeds with scruffy fur and one ear that stood up while the other flopped down, Rex proved to be a brave and loyal companion. He had a knack for sensing danger and was surprisingly adept at navigating the ship's complex corridors. Back on the Obliterator, Rex's presence brought a new sense of camaraderie to the team. He followed Jack wherever he went, often sitting by his side during strategy meetings or curling up at his feet while he worked. Rex seemed to understand the gravity of their mission, and his playful antics provided much-needed moments of levity during tense times. But Rex wasn't just a morale booster, he also proved to be a valuable asset in the field. His keen senses often alerted the team to approaching enemies before they even knew they were there. And during one particularly intense mission, Rex even managed to save Theo's life by dragging him out of the path of a falling beam just in time. As the days turned into weeks, Rex became a symbol of the rebellion's resilience. No matter how dire the situation, there was always a reason to keep fighting, even if it was just for the simple joys of life, like the wag of a dog's tail. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of planning, Jack sat on the floor of the command room, leaning against the wall with Rex curled up beside him. He absently scratched the dog's head, lost in thought. "We've come a long way, haven't we, boy?" Jack murmured. Rex responded with a soft woof, as if agreeing. Jack smiled, a rare moment of peace settling over him. "Yeah. But we're not done yet. There's still a lot of work to do." Rex thumped his tail in response, his eyes shining with a mix of loyalty and determination. Jack knew that whatever lay ahead, he wouldn't face it alone. With his team, and now Rex, by his side, he was ready for whatever the galaxy threw at them. The war continues. With Rex by their side, the rebellion's morale was higher than ever, and their efforts against the Federation grew bolder. Every day brought new challenges, but also new victories. The Federation, once an unstoppable force, was now on the defensive, its grip on Earth slipping as more and more humans joined the fight for freedom. Jack, Ava, Theo, and the rest of the team knew they had the momentum, but they also understood that the Federation wouldn't go down without a fight. Their enemy was wounded, but a wounded animal is often the most dangerous. As the rebels continued their campaign, they received intel about a major Federation operation being planned in a remote part of Earth. This operation was shrouded in secrecy, but from what Theo could gather, it involved the use of a superweapon, something capable of wiping out entire cities in a single strike. "This is it," Jack said during a strategy meeting, the map of the Federation's operation site displayed on the console before them. "If we can take this weapon out, we'll cripple their ability to wage war on Earth. But it's not going to be easy. They'll have this place locked down tight." Ava, who was leaning over the console, studying the map, nodded. "We've dealt with tight security before. The trick is figuring out how to get in without getting vaporized in the process." Theo was already working on his portable console, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'm pulling up the schematics now. Looks like the weapon is housed in an underground facility, deep beneath a mountain. They've got multiple layers of security, force fields, automated defenses, the works." Rex, who was lying at Jack's feet, perked up his ears as if sensing the tension in the room. "We need to get in, disable the weapon, and get out before they know what hit them," Jack said, his mind racing as he considered their options. "Theo, can you disable the defenses?" Theo nodded. "I can hack into their systems, but it's going to take time. We'll need to get close, and that means avoiding detection until we're right on top of them." Ava grinned. "Sounds like a job for a few well-placed distractions. I've got a few ideas." Jack smiled, his confidence growing as the plan came together. "Good. We'll split into 2 teams. Ava, you'll lead the distraction crew. Make as much noise as you can, draw their attention away from the facility. Theo, Rex, and I will be the infiltration team. We'll get in, disable the weapon, and get out." The plan was risky, but they had no other choice. If the Federation deployed their superweapon, it could mean the end of the rebellion, and millions of innocent lives. As they prepared for the mission, Rex seemed to pick up on the seriousness of the situation. He stayed close to Jack, his usual playful demeanor replaced by a focused, almost determined energy. Jack couldn't help but smile at his new companion's dedication. "You ready for this, buddy?" Jack asked, kneeling down to scratch Rex behind the ears. The dog responded with a soft woof and a wag of his tail, his eyes shining with loyalty. The night of the mission, The rebels moved out under the cover of darkness. Ava's team set up their diversion, a series of explosions and sabotage attacks designed to draw the Federation's forces away from the main facility. The plan worked perfectly. Within minutes, alarms blared across the mountainside as Federation troops scrambled to respond to the sudden assault. Meanwhile, Jack, Theo, and Rex approached the entrance to the underground facility. The entrance was heavily guarded, but with the Federation's attention focused on the distraction, they managed to slip past the outer defenses without being detected. Once inside, Theo got to work hacking into the facility's systems. His fingers flew over his console as he bypassed security protocols and disabled automated defenses. Rex stayed close, his keen senses alert for any sign of danger. As they moved deeper into the facility, the tension mounted. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the facility's machinery. Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every nerve on edge. They finally reached the control room, where the superweapon was housed. The room was massive, filled with consoles, control panels, and the glowing core of the weapon itself, a massive, pulsing sphere of energy that looked capable of annihilating anything in its path. Theo immediately went to work, hacking into the weapon's control systems. Jack stood guard, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. Rex sniffed the air, his ears twitching as he listened for any approaching enemies. Just as Theo was about to disable the weapon, the room was flooded with light. The doors slammed shut, and a squad of Federation soldiers burst in, weapons drawn. "Hands up!" The lead soldier barked, his voice echoing through the chamber. Jack raised his weapon, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out. They were trapped, and the odds were stacked against them. But before he could react, Rex sprang into action. With a fierce growl, the dog launched himself at the lead soldier, knocking him to the ground. The room erupted into chaos as the other soldiers tried to take aim, but Jack and Theo were already moving. Jack fired off a series of shots, taking down 2 soldiers before they could react. Theo, using the confusion to his advantage, quickly finished his hack, and the weapon's core began to power down. Rex, undeterred by the chaos, continued to attack, his agility and speed making him a difficult target for the soldiers. He darted between their legs, biting at their heels and distracting them long enough for Jack to take them out one by one. Within moments, the room fell silent. The soldiers lay on the ground, incapacitated, and the weapon's core dimmed as it powered down completely. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good work, Theo. And Rex. You're a lifesaver." Rex, his tail wagging furiously, trotted over to Jack, his tongue lolling out in a doggy grin. Jack couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the moment breaking as he ruffled the dog's fur. Theo, ever the professional, finished his final checks on the weapon. "We're clear. The weapon's disabled. Let's get out of here before more reinforcements arrive." They retraced their steps, moving quickly through the facility's corridors. As they reached the exit, they heard the sound of distant explosions. Ava's team was still keeping the Federation occupied. They emerged from the facility just as another explosion rocked the mountainside. Ava's diversion had done its job, the Federation forces were in disarray, and the rebels had the upper hand. As they regrouped with Ava's team, Jack felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had done it, they had taken out the Federation's superweapon and lived to tell the tale. But as they returned to the Obliterator, Jack knew this wasn't the end. The Federation was weakened, but they were far from defeated. The fight would continue, and they would need to stay one step ahead if they wanted to win this war. For now, though, they had won a crucial victory. And with Rex by their side, they knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Federation's last stand. After the successful disabling of the superweapon, the rebellion gained even more traction. Across Earth, people rallied behind Jack and his team, inspired by their courage and relentless drive for freedom. The Federation, once the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, was now cornered, their forces spread thin and their resources dwindling. But they weren't ready to surrender. Not yet. As the rebels regrouped on the Obliterator, Theo intercepted a critical piece of intelligence. The Federation had convened its remaining forces at a heavily fortified base in the heart of the Andes, a location thought to be impenetrable. There, they were planning a final counterattack, An all-or-nothing strike that would either crush the rebellion or leave the Federation in ruins. Jack called an emergency meeting, the tension in the air thick as the rebel leaders gathered in the command room. The holographic map of the Andes base hovered before them, showing a labyrinth of defenses, heavy artillery, and energy shields that made the fortress nearly impervious to attack. "This is it," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with gravity. "They've pulled all their remaining forces into this base. If we can take it down, the Federation won't have anything left to fight with. But if we fail..." Ava, who was leaning against the console with her arms crossed, finished the thought. "If we fail, it's over. They'll wipe us out, and Earth will be under their control for good." Theo, ever the realist, nodded. "We've beaten the odds before, but this is different. They know we're coming, and they're prepared. We'll need to be smarter, faster, and more coordinated than we've ever been." The room fell silent as the enormity of the task ahead sank in. It wasn't just another mission, it was the mission. The one that would determine the fate of Earth and everyone on it. Rex, sensing the tension, padded over to Jack, his tail wagging slightly as he nudged Jack's hand with his nose. Jack smiled, his hand resting on the dog's head. "We've got this," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "We've come too far to turn back now." The plan they devised was daring, even by their standards. The Obliterator would lead a full-scale assault on the base, drawing out the Federation's defenses and keeping them occupied. Meanwhile, Jack, Ava, Theo, and a select group of elite rebels would infiltrate the base through a series of underground tunnels that Theo had discovered. These tunnels, long forgotten and not listed on any official maps, would give them a way in undetected. Once inside, they would disable the energy shields and sabotage the base's main power core, effectively crippling the Federation's operations and paving the way for the Obliterator to deliver the final blow. The night before the mission, the base buzzed with activity as everyone prepared for what could be their final battle. Jack, Ava, Theo, and the rest of the infiltration team gathered their gear, running through the plan one last time. As they geared up, Rex trotted over to Ava, who was tightening the straps on her pack. The dog sat at her feet, his eyes wide and alert, as if he understood the seriousness of what was about to happen. "You're sticking with us, huh?" Ava said with a grin, giving Rex a scratch behind the ears. "Good. We're gonna need all the help we can get." Jack joined them, crouching down to Rex's level. "You ready for this, boy?" Rex responded with a soft woof and a wag of his tail, his eyes full of loyalty and determination. The next day, as the sun began to rise over the mountains, the rebels moved into position. The Obliterator hovered ominously above the Andes, its weapons primed and ready to unleash havoc. The Federation forces below were already on high alert, their defenses bristling with energy as they prepared for the impending attack. The infiltration team, led by Jack and Ava, made their way to the entrance of the underground tunnels. Theo had worked tirelessly to decode the ancient schematics, and they knew that these tunnels were their best shot at getting inside without being detected. They slipped into the tunnels, the cold, damp air wrapping around them like a shroud. The passageways were narrow and winding, with centuries-old stone walls covered in moss and dust. The only light came from the small, portable lamps they carried, casting long shadows that danced along the walls as they moved deeper into the mountain. Theo led the way, his eyes glued to his handheld scanner, which mapped out the tunnels in real time. "We're close," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the narrow space. "The main power core should be just up ahead." They continued on, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. Rex stayed close to Jack, his ears perked up, ready to alert them to any danger. Finally, they reached a large chamber where the Federation's power core hummed with energy, a massive, pulsating machine that powered the entire base. It was heavily guarded, with soldiers patrolling the perimeter and automated turrets scanning the area. Ava surveyed the scene, her eyes narrowed. "This is gonna be tricky. We need to take out those guards quietly, or we'll have the whole base on our heads." Jack nodded, formulating a plan. "We split into pairs. Ava, you take the left side with Rex. Theo, you're with me on the right. We take out the guards simultaneously, then move in on the core." Rex seemed to understand his role, staying close to Ava as they moved into position. The team spread out, each pair taking their designated side, creeping through the shadows like ghosts, At Jack's signal, they struck. Ava, with Rex by her side, dispatched the guards with swift precision, her energy weapons silenced to avoid drawing attention. Theo used his tech skills to disable the turrets, rerouting their targeting systems to avoid detection. Within minutes, the guards were down, and the team moved in on the power core. Theo set to work, his fingers flying over the console as he began the process of overloading the core. "This is going to create one hell of a chain reaction," Theo said, his voice tense as he worked. "Once it blows, the entire base will go down with it." "Then we better get out of here fast," Jack replied, keeping watch for any incoming enemies. Rex, ever vigilant, suddenly perked up, growling softly as he looked toward a dark corner of the chamber. Jack followed his gaze, his grip tightening on his weapon. "What is it, Rex?" The answer came in the form of a squad of Federation soldiers, bursting into the chamber with weapons blazing. The team dove for cover as blaster fire filled the room. "We've got company," Ava shouted, returning fire as she took down one of the soldiers. Theo cursed under his breath, his hands still working the console. "I need more time. Keep them off me." Jack and Ava fought back with everything they had, but the Federation soldiers kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Rex, ever the brave companion, darted through the chaos, biting and distracting the soldiers long enough for Jack and Ava to take them out. But it wasn't enough. They were outnumbered, and the situation was quickly becoming desperate. "We can't hold them off much longer," Ava shouted, her voice strained as she fired off another shot. Theo's voice came over the calm despite the chaos. "I'm almost done. Just a few more seconds." Rex, sensing the urgency, launched himself at the lead soldier, knocking him to the ground. Jack used the distraction to take out the remaining soldiers, but more were already pouring into the chamber. "Now, Theo!" Jack yelled, his voice barely audible over the sound of the battle. Theo's fingers flew over the console one last time, and the power core began to overload, its hum turning into a deafening roar as the energy reached critical levels. "Get out of here!" Theo shouted, grabbing his gear and sprinting for the exit. The team bolted for the tunnels, the walls shaking as the core prepared to explode. Rex was right beside Jack, his pace quick and determined as they raced against time. They made it out of the tunnels just as the base began to collapse, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the core detonated. The explosion sent a shockwave through the mountain, the sound of the blast echoing for miles. As the dust settled, Jack looked back at the base. The once impenetrable fortress was now a smoldering ruin, and the Federation's final stronghold on Earth was no more. "We did it," Ava said, her voice breathless but triumphant. "We actually did it." Theo, catching his breath, nodded. "Yeah. We did." Rex, his tail wagging furiously, let out a happy bark, as if celebrating the victory with them. But Jack knew that while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. The Federation had been dealt a critical blow, but they still had forces in other parts of the galaxy, and they wouldn't stop until Earth was back under their control. Still, for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of hope. They had proven that the Federation wasn't invincible, and with their victory today, they had given humanity a fighting chance. As they regrouped with the rest of the rebels, Jack allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they had taken the first steps toward a future where humanity could stand on its own. And with Rex by their side, Jack knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The dog had become more than just a companion, he was a symbol of the resilience and loyalty that defined their fight for freedom. The rebels returned to the Obliterator, where they were met with cheers and applause. The mood was jubilant, but there was also a sense of solemnity. They had won a major victory, but they knew the fight wasn't over. The Federation still had forces spread across the galaxy, and while Earth was now free, the war for true independence had just begun. Jack gathered his team in the command room for a final debrief. The atmosphere was charged with both excitement and anticipation for what was to come. "Today, we dealt the Federation a blow they won't soon forget," Jack began, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "But we all know this isn't the end. They'll regroup, they'll come back, and we need to be ready. But this time, we have something they didn't expect, hope. And that's something they can't take away from us." Ava nodded in agreement, her usual bravado tempered with a newfound sense of purpose. "We've got momentum on our side now. We need to keep pushing, keep fighting, and show the galaxy that we won't back down." Theo, ever the strategist, added, "We'll need to strengthen our alliances, reach out to other oppressed worlds. The Federation's power is waning, and we're not the only ones who want to see them fall." As the team discussed their next steps, Jack felt a sense of resolve settle over him. They had come so far, and while the road ahead was uncertain, they had proven that they could rise to any challenge. With Rex lying at his feet, Jack knew they would face whatever came next together. The meeting wrapped up, and as the team dispersed, Jack took a moment to himself. He walked to the observation deck, where the vast expanse of space stretched out before him. Stars twinkled in the distance, and Earth, now free from the Federation's control, glowed with a renewed sense of life. Rex joined him, sitting quietly by his side. Jack reached down to scratch the dog's ears, a soft smile playing on his lips. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, buddy. But we'll take it one step at a time." Rex let out a contented sigh, leaning into Jack's touch. As Jack gazed out at the stars, he knew that the fight for freedom was far from over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, but with his team, and now Rex, by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held. For now, though, they had earned a moment of peace. A moment to reflect on how far they had come and to gather strength for the challenges still to come. The galaxy was vast, and the Federation was still a force to be reckoned with, but Jack knew one thing for sure: humanity would never be subjugated again. They had awakened to their true potential, and nothing could stop them now. As the stars continued to twinkle in the distance, Jack felt a deep sense of resolve. This was only the beginning. The fight for freedom would continue, and they would see it through to the end. And with that, Jack turned to leave, Rex following close behind, ready for whatever lay ahead.